welcome everybody. We'll get started in a couple minutes, but I wonder if I could ask you to come forward a little bit. So we made space for lots of people, but if everybody's towards the back, then it's better if we fill in the front couple rows. Maybe that'd be nice. Good afternoon, welcome everybody. I'm Roy Ketchum, here representing the Latino Latin American Studies program. Ordinarily Bruce Campbell, the director of the LLAS, would be here to open this talk and to share some words with you, but he wasn't able to be here and he asked me to get things started, and I'm happy to do that. So first, a little bit of an overview on this particular series that we have. I don't think I need a microphone, right? But I think I'm on. Did you hear that echo too? So tonight's evening is the first in our spring 2019 Latino Latin American Studies series program entitled on the theme of Politics of the Imagination, Historical Remembering. We hope that you'll join us again on Tuesday, March 12th for Dr. Gansi Perez's presentation on material memory of the Central American diaspora in Los Angeles, and for our final event in the spring 2019 series on Wednesday, April 3rd, photographer Javier Tavera's presentation on collective memory and borders. And you'll see more announcements coming out from Latino Latin American Studies, or LLAS, on both of those events. And students should you be interested in participating in a 0 or 1 credit course that goes along with those, that would consist of being at those 3 presentations and being part of a group that does some reflection and maybe some kind of action on campus in relation to that. If you'd be interested, you can do 2 things. Check in with me right after we finish here and we'll get your name on the list, or you can email directly to Bruce Campbell, who's the director of Latino Latin American Studies. So the theme of this semester's series centers on the concept of historical memory. How we imagine the past guides in complex ways how we engage with the present. This is because historical memory, the stories about the historical past that communities create and circulate and identify with, shapes the ways that we perceive ourselves and others. Historical memory is a site of agency, but also of potential disempowerment. Forgetting can leave some among us without a place in a collective story. Selective remembering can elevate some among us while diminishing others, while injustices forgotten continue to haunt the social body. How and who and what we remember is entangled with relations of power. Historical memory is a cultural site where imaginative work can bring to collective awareness the politics of remembering. Augusto Boal, the Brazilian theater practitioner, theorist, and political activist, and founder of Theater Depressed, described theater as the art of seeing ourselves. Our speakers this evening will introduce us to this art of seeing ourselves. Lorena Roffé and Stéphane are the founding artivists of Me Toca, which means it's my turn to act and reality touches me, while also being the acronym in Spanish for multiplication and exploration of theater depressed in Central America. Some of you know them as educators who've worked with the St. Ben's and St. John's students on our semester-long study abroad program in Guatemala, which comes back to campus or has been coming back to campus as RAD, or Reflection Action Dialogue. For the last 10 years, they've worked with communities in diverse contexts, rural areas, universities, schools, shelters, in many different countries in the Americas, using Theater of the Oppressed to enable individuals and groups to become protagonists of their own realities. Through this work, the creativity of Theater of the Oppressed has built organizational power and generated collective processes with political impact for women with HIV, indigenous youth, and migrants in Central America and Mexico, among others. Tonight's presentation is part of a week-long residency through which Lorena and Steph have worked with CSBSJU students to create spaces for reflection and dialogue here on our campus community. I'll say a little more about that before we close tonight, about what you can anticipate at 7:30 tonight. Here we have a little bit of theory. At 7:30, we'll see it in practice. We'll say more before we close. The residency and the presentation tonight would not have been possible without the generous support of sponsors from the Center for Global Education. We have Kevin and Nicole here. Thanks very much for the support of this. The Department of Hispanic Studies, International Intercultural Student Services, both student senates, and as well as considerable time and energy from Mary Niedenfuhr, who's the department coordinator for Hispanic Studies and Latino Latin American Studies, Danielle Taylor, who's my spouse, who probably will come in later, but has been involved with the process throughout. And Bruce, had he been here, would have said something about me, but he was giving thanks to me. And I'd also like to say thanks to Bruce for the support from LLAS for this initiative. It has been a really wonderful week-long residency that we've had with Steph and Lorena, coming to a close today. They fly home to Guatemala tomorrow. And just a final word of, I'd just like to say, from deep in my heart, thank you very much for joining us and for being part of this process. With that, I'll leave you with Stéphane and Lorena Roffé.
We can go back to our seats. So, as we saw in this exercise, it's a very basic example. What we do through Theater of the Oppressed is to investigate ourselves from an aesthetic, a symbolic exploration to understand our concrete realities. Theater of the Oppressed is, as Barbara Santos says, an aesthetic means for the search of concrete means for the transformation of unjust realities. It is a political and aesthetic methodology formulated by the Brazilian Augusto Boal at the end of the 60s, in times of powerful authoritarian dictatorships in Latin America. This methodology brings, as you started experiencing, brings together a set of exercises, games, and artistic techniques to remind us that we are creative beings, and therefore we are agents of construction and capable of transformation of realities. Aesthetic as a means to see what we usually do not look at, listen to what is hard for us to hear, and awaken our sensory thinking to make visible and deconstruct the realities that oppress us. Through workshops and staged presentations, we seek to generate reflection that can lead to transformative action in daily life. Who are the protagonists in a Theater of the Oppressed process? The participants. Participants are the protagonists through all the process. They do the analysis, the selection of the situation to be transformed, the aesthetic creation to reflect the situation and then look for alternatives, the performance of the aesthetic proposals, and the concrete actions to transform reality. Theater of the Oppressed is a theater from, for, and by the oppressed people. We mainly work through, as many of you know, because who had seen a rat performance? Yeah. So many of you, if you didn't have the chance today, 7:30. So you can see that we mainly work through form theater. which is a dialogic exercise detonated by a question that was constructed by the group. It is an honest question, in the sense that we still do not know an effective response to the situation, and that finding it is really necessary for the group. The audience are not spectators, but spect-actors or spect-actresses, participating by entering the scene, replacing the oppressed characters and improvising alternatives together. And this way, together, we rehearse on the scene the change we want and urgently need to make in reality. That is why we call it theater of hope, because we are convinced that in some way, collectively, we will be able to transform the situations that oppress us. Oppress.
When we speak of oppressed, we speak of that person who is prevented from doing what he or she wants and needs to do, or is forced to do something he or she does not want, and is aware of the need to transform that situation. By fighting against the oppression in their lives, the person becomes a protagonist, even if they do not achieve their purpose. To speak of oppression is to focus on the imbalance of power that causes unfair situation for oppressed groups. To understand oppression, we must understand the different social groups involved in the situation and what power relationships exist between them. The process always involves making a structural and collective analysis of the specific situation that the group faces. This exercise is named ACC. And it is in this exercise of ACC to rise from the micro to the macro, where we can understand the structural causes of the oppression that we live. But how do we do that? Playing, acting, writing poetry, creating images with our bodies. We remember our individual stories. We express them with in an aesthetic way. And when we see the others, we rediscover our own. We find similarities, and we understand that is not a personal problem or something I failed to do, but rather something that has to do with the structures that surround me or that allow the oppression that I experience to take place. And once this memory leaves my body to meet others, and I discover a collective memory, which helps me understand the system that oppresses me. I stop blaming myself, and I stop thinking that the way out of oppression has to do with changing my attitude or with an individual strategy. We come to understand together the structure of the system that generates injustices, one that is often upheld by a dominant historical memory. We dismantle that selective memory which perpetuates oppression and make invisible our strengths and power. And then we see that we also need to think together in the strategies to disarm both the system of oppression and that dominant historical memory. And these strategies must be obviously collective. And the key is that the actions will be the result of a group reflection of the analysis of our collective memory. It is a process of each person and the group as a whole, which has nothing to do with indoctrination. As we say in popular education, nobody learns in the head of others. It's in my own body. Through my experiences, with my aesthetic expressions, that I make political analysis. An investigation from the inside out from the personal to the collective. And is that from the collective? So, is that easy?
What do you think?
Is that easy to do it? No way. It is a slow and a continuous process that must be in constant development.
Yeah, this exercise of assesse is not an aim in itself, but it's a way to achieve the objective of theory of the oppressed, that is to generate concrete social actions of transformation. And these actions will not make sense if there's not a deep understanding of the structural causes of the oppression that it's being experienced, and that the oppression that it's being experienced, and this oppression that we want to transform. And that is what theory of the oppressed makes possible. We make memory of the oppressions from our own bodies. Then we express it from sensory channels, through sensory channels. We collectivize it. We analyze it. We put it in dialogue with others and look for alternatives. And finally, we implement transformative actions. And maybe at this point, after we explain all of that, you're asking yourself, okay, but how? How do you do that? What are we talking about? So then we want to share with you some examples that maybe will help us to understand this relationship between having this collective memory, this analysis of structures, and taking it to transformative actions.
I start the first example.
Yeah.
An example is with the oldest group with whom we have been working since 2009. It's called Nueva Sonrisa. It's a group of indigenous women with HIV. At the beginning of the process, the group said, our oppression is due to the diagnosis of HIV. They treat us poorly in the clinic and discriminate against us. We created a forum theater about the discrimination that they live in their family and the mistreatment at the clinics. By investigating further through the exercise of assesse, issues such as colonization and the lack of work leading to extreme poverty emerged. This resulted in one of the most striking concrete actions of the group. They made a collective legal complaint on behalf of one of group's participants related to her having been fired from a job, evidently because of her diagnosis. It was through the process of assesse that the group reflected on how the poverty factor influences the oppression they experience, and it was in light of that understanding that the agreement on making a legal process to defend their right as a worker was so strong. There is HIV, yes, but there is a structural element of poverty that makes HIV a condition of so much oppression.
Another example is with immigrant women on the southern border between Mexico and Guatemala. The problem they raised was that it was very difficult for them to rent a house in Mexico. In a first analysis, it became clear to them that it has to do with the fact of being immigrants and the discrimination and prejudices that exist towards this population. So, without leaving aside this analysis, we investigate in the individual and the ancestral histories, the ancestral relationship of women of their family with the land. We started playing with newspapers, and we invited them to create images of the relationship of the women of their families with the land. And then we had the room filled with stories. Stories of women taking care of the land and taking care of the land, of the house. Stories of dispossession. images of recreating over and over a new space to live in, images that showed how themselves represent home for their family. And from the images and stories of some that resonated in others, they come the discovery. This complex relationship of women with the land, of women with the possibility of inhabiting, with the possibility of possessing and being calm in a territory, is not a new problem. So their current situation of not being accepted as adequate renters has not to do only with how they behave or only with the fact of being immigrants, but also, and actually in larger part, with the fact of them being women. And from there, it's opened a whole new sphere of analysis and strategies. Women in general, we are responsible for the care of the family. And often, they were denied as renters because of the complexity involved in this situation. And from there, they came with a concrete action of transformation. They organized themselves among other migrant women to set up a nursery and take care of all the children. And this way, they were mitigating one of the barriers to accessing a home. This idea that they will leave their kids in the house and the kids will destroy the houses. Individuals' bodies that make memory, which is transformed into a collective memory that leads to an understanding that promotes transformation. So we have these two examples, but we also wanted to share with you, because sometimes it's easier to understand when we have, we can understand what it is theater of the oppressed, and sometimes we have to understand what is not theater of the oppressed to understand it better. So we have an anti-example, anti-example. Last year, we got a call from an international organization that called us saying,
hey, we want you to do a forum theater with the communities in relation to the water issue.
Wow, we were excited. It was a huge organization offering us a long-term project, these ones that the kind of we like. So we started introducing ourselves, explaining all the games, all the research.
What we want is a forum theater that teaches people to change their attitude. Listen, get them to wash their hands and build bathrooms in their homes and pay a fee to receive clean water. Yeah.
Yeah, they wanted the ostrich technique, to hide the head, the eyes, the ears, in relation to the social and political context in which a certain situation is given. No, we refuse. That contradicts the ethical principles of theater of the oppressed. We are not going to tell people what to do. We are not going to tell people, wash your hands, that's your problem. We are not going to make them responsible for the complex situation in relation to water. So we propose to make a genuine theater of the oppressed, a genuine theater of the oppressed process in relation to the water issue. So we can really investigate with the group.
But that can be transformed into talking about corruption.
Exactly.
Power relations.
Yes.
Machismo.
Exactly.
No, we don't know what that.
It was obvious. The exercise of assessing this critical analysis of reality threatens those who hold the systems of oppression. The organization states, of course, without our support for doing this false forum theater with the communities. The theater of the oppressed processes invite us to a constant, sensory, and sincere dialogue with reality. It forces us to face it because we work on the urgent issues that the group present. Reality prevails, and we have to talk with it. That was the experience that we lived strongly in relation to the immigrant caravan and our work in the Mexico-Guatemalan border. We were in a training for trainers with immigrants, activists, and workers in the field of immigration. Intensive trainings to be facilitators of theater of the oppressed. In our formations, we usually lock ourselves up to be in full concentration and creative process, right? They were in a full concentration and creative process this week. But the immigrant caravan was arriving. We were moving forward with the workshop with the creation of a piece of forum theater, and the caravan was advancing at the same pace. Every day one more step, and the caravan got closer. Already about to cross the border. Thousands of women, children, young people and men escaping hunger and violence, believing that somewhere there must be a better life. Stripped of everything but hope, they advanced together, visible, challenging the clandestinity or the secrecy with which they want to condemn those who cross the borders. Usually, in our last day of workshop, we make a public presentation of the work that we've been doing. It was our last day, and the question was posed. What sense does it have to follow in our workshop process when an entire caravan is arriving and shouting to the world that Central America is full of injustice? And then we knew.
We could not be indifferent to that call.
We cannot be indifferent to that call. And again, exercises, games, questions. We were searching, we investigate. What was heard in the city as the caravan was arriving? What fears does the media want to provoke? And what positions do we want to take in face of that? It was an intense and committed process that challenged the activists and the NGO sector involved in the workshop to position themselves politically in front of the imminent arrival of the immigrant caravan. And they chose to commit themselves, putting their body, their voices, and art. We created a performance whose main phrase was, "Les recibimos acá," we welcome you here. All a declaration of principles confronting a ferocious campaign of loss of prestige of the immigrants and lots of xenophobia. Les recibimos acá. We welcome you here. We do not fear you. We do not close the doors. We do not see ourselves as having more rights than you to have a dignified life. Les recibimos acá. We welcome you here. We repeat the performance several times in several central spaces, receiving the emotion, perplexity, and support from the audience.
Then, when we meet with a group of migrant women with whom we have been working for a long time, we invited them to join the performance. They replied.
We cannot expose ourselves publicly. It is very dangerous.
We listen to their positions and we ask if there is something they want to do when the caravan arrives. There was no doubt. It had to be supported. They decided to invest all the group saving funds collected in the year to make sandwiches and distribute them to the caravan. 100, 200, 300, and more sandwiches that we made together in the strategy of supporting without exposing ourselves. And while doing the sandwiches, we sang.
Les recibimos acá. Les recibimos acá. Les recibimos acá. We welcome you here. We welcome you here.
And when we finished assembling the sandwiches, a woman reflected.
Our brothers and sisters are there. We have to go out and show support. We have to do the performance.
And we left. Girls, boys, adult, women, and activists to say to the caravan.
Les recibimos acá. We welcome you here.
And the caravan received us with surprise, applause, and emotion.
Les recibimos acá. Les recibimos acá. We welcome you here. We welcome you here. That's the opportunity offered by Theater of the Oppressed, to get the word out. And from our own stories, understand the present, to transform it into a hopeful and just future for everyone. Thank you.
We just say thank you very much, and I'm sure we have time for questions. Who would like to get started with questions or comments?
How do you say, well, first off, how do you pronounce the comment that you made when you said you are welcome here? Well, we welcome you here. I got the la.
Les recibimos acá.
Could you repeat that word?
Les recibimos
Okay,
acá.
thank you.
So I just want to make sure I understood correctly. So the migrant women we've worked with for a long time at first, no, they did not want to go out because it is dangerous, but in the singing and the making of the sandwiches, there was this galvanization. They felt, yes, we do want to go, and then they did go.
Exactly.
Okay, that's so beautiful. I was listening and I thought that it really speaks to how firmly you kept with the principle of this open forum that has to be guided from the others. Because when the big corporate people called you, you said, no, we can't do your thing. But when the people you really believe in and think should speak said, we should do this, you also didn't say, no, you're gonna go do it, whether you want to or not. You said, okay, let's just make sandwiches. So you really, on both counts, you listened to the other, and so you said to the big corporate person, I will not tell them what to do. And then when the women said, no, we're not ready, you also said, okay, we'll make sandwiches with you. And I just think that's beautiful that both times you firmly stayed with this principle of listening, and then how wonderful that the singing and the sandwiches was motivating. It's really, really beautiful.
Yeah, I think without listening, there's no theater of the oppressed. And we really do believe that it's from, for, and by the oppressed. Like, it's for the people, so there's no sense of making any actions if they are not feeling like convinced to do them, and if they do not commit and they don't feel the need to do it.
Whereabouts in Mexico was this?
That was in Tapachula, in the
Just after the
southern.
Guatemalan border.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. After Guatemala, Tapachula is the first big city. On the
And
way
it's
of the
like,
caravan.
it was the first stop on the migrant caravan after they crossed the border, the Guatemalan-Mexican border. It was like the first stop in Mexican territory. So was lots around this one, because they didn't knew how it's going to be, to have this caravan.
Did you see many children,
Yeah.
Yeah.
families? Yeah.
A lot of women with children, because it was an opportunity to do a safer migration, because they were all together and visible, and
Right.
it's so much risks usually for women and kids. And this time it was an opportunity for them.
It was really a sense of community. Like really, people were taking care of others, and it wasn't that they were family or friends before, but they knew their work together. You wanted to say
I
something?
just wondered if there are examples of organizations or political groups that are open enough to go through a process that you offer honestly interested in the outcome, as opposed to trying to get a desired outcome. Does that happen?
No, they are. If not, no, they are. I think RAD is an example. RAD in here is an example of very brave young people. Really
Part of an organization that are willing to just have the experience and let the conclusions be whatever the conclusions
exactly.
are.
We had very challenging moments with different organizations. Like this one, it's very clear from the beginning, so we didn't start any kind of collaborations. But we did have collaborations. Well, we did work together. I don't know if that's a collaboration, but we worked together in a project with, for example, an NGO, where the group was a group of indigenous people, and they were, at the end, like the oppression that they wanted to work on was the discrimination that they were feeling from the NGO that was giving the funds for the work.
Right.
You see what's happened?
But there's
So-
a chance in that, potentially a chance in that construct to, if the NGO is willing to take the findings and change
Uh-huh,
to grow.
exactly.
I mean, that's why I'm wondering.
I think for that, RAD is a great,
Yeah,
great
yeah.
expression of that,
Mhm.
a great example. Because we started it with our complices, I don't know how to say that. Yeah, so we started with them, but with all the support of those complices, and then the support of Mary Hinton, for example.
Sure.
So we started at something more from our instinct of this, as that's at something that can be interesting for the students, but then the institution was really open to give the support and open to listen to what was happening.
Yeah.
With the other example, they knew the NGO will not be open to listen that they are being racist to the people that they are supposed to support.
Right.
So the group didn't want it to show the performance.
Sure.
And we respected that because it's not, we're saying that solidarity, it's a Che Guevara phrase, but it's solidarity is taking the same risks. And we are not taking the same risks as the group. We cannot say, okay, go, show, because we are not receiving fundings from like our water will not come from this organization, but their water, maybe yes. So they have to decide which kind of risks they want to take, and we are going to go with them.
And sometimes you're not, I don't know, you're not, the institution, organization thinks they are ready to take that risk, but they realize that I'm not ready on the way, no? They say that we work with an NGO about machismo, and then they realize there were like a lot of privilege gonna be touched, and it was more complicated. They said, no, you just wanted something light about the gender, no? Not ban machismo, it's complex.
Because then they realize the director, the board of the director, like all were men. Like, oh, no, well, enough of gender issues, now let's go to climate change.
That's true. Yeah, there's a big opportunity. But
Yeah.
for this opportunity, we have to. That's the challenge that we face. It's work with institution, organization who have this capacity to grow at the same rate of what's growing, the institution growing, no, and then yeah, that's an opportunity. But if you don't see it, it's not an opportunity.
It's a threat.
Mhm.
You wanted to say something? Go, go.
So you have a base community in Guatemala, right? Even though you do go to different places. So when you perform the same play over and over again, do you find that like there are always new insights and like very different kind of insights with the different groups that you present?
Yeah. Like it really, even if we present the same foreign theater piece, the same content in the same community, we will have new insights because reality is dynamic and because people like sometimes like it happens to me as well when I'm the audience, I can start thinking about something, but I don't do it, and then I go to another performance, and then, okay, I want to try that. So, because our reflections also evolved with others' ideas. So that's the idea also of the collective, of the collective reflection. So yeah, we have, and then if the audience changes, it's completely different. Like, it really depends from the point of view of who is looking at the problem. What are the alternatives that we will propose?
Presentation after presentation, the group growing because and it's getting more specialist of the theme that you want treat, no? And it needs, I think the group needs all that presentation and sometimes the same idea doing 3 times, 4 times, and it's never the same at the end.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting and inspiring work you're doing. It's quite amazing. I was wondering, when you were in at the border with Guatemala and helping these migrants trying to reach the U.S., did you by any chance come across non-profit organizations like Médicos Sin Fronteras, Doctors Without Borders, or the ACNUR, you know, the Human Resource Center for Refugees?
Mm-hmm.
Did you come across any of these organizations? I'm just curious if they were present there. Were they?
Yeah.
Yeah, they were present. No,
They were-
all that you. That they were present, and they were also part of them doing the training
workshop
for
with us.
the training for trainer workshop with us, no, during the caravan coming.
Nice.
But yeah, there were all that organization present. So
They were
And-
committed people to.
Yeah.
It was all kind of participation.
Okay.
Like, they were people that were more about like the political situation and like reaching the high levels of power, but not being able that people are needing bathrooms, that maybe like all these political issues are important, but if you are walking for 1 week, you need a bathroom and a place to shower. So, for example, that kind of amazed us, this ability of being able to see what's happening, like what are the needs of the people. But there were many other organizations that really were there with the people, and other organizations that were doing very important work with the police, with the government. And yeah, it's an historic moment. It had never been a caravan like that. So people were trying to react, to analyze, to help, and to understand what's the best way to support people. Yeah.
How often do you guys come to St. Lance and St. John's?
Every time you invite us. No, we came, that's the second time, as Me Toca. We came here in 2000.
October 2016, Lorena came.
Exactly.
but we received Guatemala.
Yeah, but every year we work with the study, with the Guatemala study.
this was, I'll offer a little bit of a response to that too. So since 2013, we've offered, or me toca, Lorena and Steph, or some other combination of the organization have offered a Theater Budapest workshop course during 10 weeks of the Guatemala Study Abroad program. Since 2016, it resulted in the students making the choice to bring their foreign theater pieces they created back to campus. And so, which then became the organization on campus called RAD, or Reflection Action Dialogue. RAD has created 3 theater performance pieces and performed on campus, 3 unique pieces since 2016, 17, and 18 groups. And we had an idea, an intuition, let's have an experiment to see what would it look like to bring Metoka here to campus so there can be an opportunity for students, not just studying abroad in Guatemala. And we have 3 of those students right in the front here that have been working, playing, and creating over the last week, and would be performing their foreign piece again, or tonight rather, with another collection of, there will be 10 of us in total. And yeah.
We have one more question.
You should come, 7:30.
So maybe that's a good place to end, because we do, that is a nice segue for an announcement. So as you're on your way out there, you'll see a little bit about that foreign theater performance that will take place today at 7:30 in the Coleman Theater in the basement level at the BAC. I also would like to mention again that Latino Latin American Studies will continue this series with 2 events that you can watch the emails from, and students should be interested in being part of that. The sort of mini 0 or 1 credit course that goes along with that. Go ahead and send a message to me, Roy Ketchum, or Bruce Campbell, or you can grab me right now and we'll get your name on a piece of paper that I'll find over there. Other than that, I think I'd just like to have us all thank Lorena and Steph. And so this was telling the story, but if it's theater, the best way to do is to be part of it. So come to the action tonight at 7:30.
Yeah.
Waiting for you.
Thanks for having me.